Well, Kelsey, thank you so much for being here today. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Kelsey was on the Get to Know Your Wedding Pro podcast a couple weeks ago. She's a hair stylist and also a business coach, which is really kind of, we got talking a lot about different things business owners could be doing, at home in general. And so I kind of have this idea of doing making the best of your time at home right now. Weddings, people, we're ending whatever this terrible wedding season was, just for business and everything else. And I love, marketing, branding, working on things. I was thinking about this before we were recording. If there was a job where I could just make Facebook listings and things for people, I just love all that little minutia stuff, which is not really exciting, but I think this is going to be great. We're going to go through if you're a wedding vendor today, and even if you're not, if you're someone and you have your own business, if you work for yourself, if you want to improve kind of the way you do anything, I think this is going to have a lot of benefits. So we have Kelsey here with Kelsey Marie Knutson. Thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. As you mentioned, am a hairstylist by trade, but I also have a business degree in entrepreneurship. I've worked in the startup world. I have done hair and makeup for the wedding industry. I've led a team of hair and makeup people. So I've worn a lot of different hats in my time. And that plus COVID has all kind of caused me to just reprioritize what I really want to focus on and grow. And that is this business coaching space. I'm really passionate about helping people get started and grow businesses they are really passionate about and creating some work-life balance within that. So that's kind of my mission. My name is my brand as of now. So just to keep it easy for you to find me on the internet. And yeah, I'm so excited to have this conversation. I think during this time, and especially the wedding industry specifically, there was such what do we do with our time if we can't work in our normal capacity? Initially, I think a lot of us had a grief process of what that was and how to pivot, how to adapt. So today we kind of have some ideas to talk through on ways you can work on your business, literally right from your home, right from your couch for free, just to help you get on the path to growth for the years to come.
Yeah, and it's really something I'm passionate about. And obviously I'm speaking as, Dorothy and I don't have kids. I definitely understand that there's people and business owners that have a lot of other things going on. I absolutely understand that. But I remember back in March, we do the Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Every week we're doing a new wedding vendor interview. And when March hit, kind of things shut down, I thought, well, I'm going to get 1 million of these podcasts, recorded, and people are sitting around and wanting to do everything. And we didn't get, it was a struggle to get anything. And I think it's so easy when things are kind of just slow. It's really hard to kind of find that motivation sometimes. And I don't know if everybody feels that way. I don't, but I see that in people, and I see just, I don't know what to do. I don't know, I'm trying to get up, trying to post stuff, you're trying to, all these different things. And so that's my goal today is, wedding vendors listening, what are some things we can do just to make the best of our time, to grow everything. Kelsey is kind of the expert on this. We did this a couple of weeks ago with Grace, talking about wedding planning, well-being, and kind of the mentality behind getting to know, couples and getting to know your partner. And that worked great. And I think this is going to work today too. Great with Kelsey going through just some top 5 things that we can work on. So where do you want to start? Where are we going here?
Yeah, first off, with the mindset stuff and just getting started, I think there's initially we can't do anything, so I'm just not going to do anything. And then the realization okay, I should do something. And then it's well, what do I do? So I think that third phase is kind of what we're speaking to today. Those people who realize there's things I could probably work on and just not really knowing where to get started or how. So I'm just going to start with number 1. I made a list of 5. We'll hit all 5. And I'll start with number 1, and Reed, you let me know if you want me to pause or expand on anything.
Perfect. Let's go for it.
Number 1 is super easy, and it's to reach out to your clients and serve them. And this is not hey, come buy from me. Hey, let's book your next wedding. Heck, they don't know. For a lot of people, it's they don't know what they're doing. But just a simple, customized way to reach out to your clients, whether that's social media, an email that's personalized to them. I even got addresses of my repeat clients in the salon and just wrote them a handwritten card, just thinking of you during this crazy time. Hope you're doing well. No strings attached, no expectations, but that a little bit goes a really long way we're all service providers. We provide a service. And I think that is where you can really stick out and be different, especially during this time. And we're all also human beings. So it's just opening up that olive branch. And who knows, down the road, maybe they were thinking of booking with you, or maybe they wanted to support you in a different way, or maybe like me, I pivoted into a brand new business. It opened up a door for that conversation that came from an authentic place rather than, here, let me just continue to sell from you because I'm desperate. So that's number one, is to reach out and serve your audience.
I love that. I think, and that's something, I always try to do. And it's so funny because I don't, I post a lot online and I don't have that many followers. So I kind of can keep an eye on like who is looking at things. I'm not that popular of a guy. And it's funny to me because I always, anniversaries are a huge thing for me. I always, if they're on Instagram, tag them. Otherwise I send an email. And it's so interesting. The photographers of the weddings that I'm at, or even like other videographers, I do all this. I'm like, don't you guys like, have you ever, like, why isn't everybody doing this? Right? Like, this isn't that challenging. I have, like you were saying, you collect emails or, addresses. I have a spreadsheet. It's really not that hard. And when a wedding comes up, you put it on the spreadsheet, and then you have the spreadsheet. You can set up, reminders or email, whatever you want to do. Nothing's automated. I mean, I send everything, but you can set up these things. It's not. Why do you think? I don't know why people struggle so much with that. I mean, I know that's a difficult thing, but just little things like that it seems like people just don't even think about doing sometimes.
I think sometimes people get really caught up in the initial interaction they're having with a client. And especially in the wedding industry, you're part of a moment, which is so cool, but you could really be a part of the whole journey, regardless of what type of vendor you are. And if you also, just in any business, you think of the customer journey and the relationship you have with people can extend beyond just that first initial service they bought from you. And people, I think, just don't think of it from that perspective. And I'm sure there's people who you tag and reach out to who maybe they unfollow you over time. That evolves and changes. But I don't know. Who cares? At least you tried. And I think just coming from a really genuine place of like, hey, I just care about you and I think you're great, it goes so much further than that way. When you do come to a point where you are trying to book clients, they're already prepared for that because they've already been hearing from you.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing is it's not a disingenuous. It's not a you're doing it to get something back. It really is,
Totally.
I'm definitely trying to wish them well, check in, see how things, yeah, it's definitely not, there's no strings attached. Like you said, sending your letters and stuff out. I think that's very important is to make that differentiation, right?
Yeah. And it just feels good because then, not everyone's going to respond, but sometimes people do. And when you're just in that stuck, like, I don't have a ton of great motivation to work off of right now, it's so empowering to have someone reach back and be like, thank you for thinking of me. That meant so much. Those little things go so far. And like I said, this doesn't have to be a big ordeal. It could be an email. It could be a simple Instagram message. It could be a Facebook message. It could be a handwritten note, a postcard, whatever. But just having that personal touch, I think, goes a really long way.
We had a wedding, I think it was 5, 6 years ago. It was right after I had just quit, my job. It was like that first spring. I can't remember if it was like May or, kind of that first year, very little correspondence, right? I mean, nowadays I try to be a lot more whatever, but this was very much just like, I booked somebody, we did the wedding. It was great. They were happy, whatever. And I had sent them an email last year and her husband is in the armed services. I can't remember what branch. And I had sent them a note and I was like, man, because sometimes you're like, I hope they're still together. I don't really know, really don't know what's going on here. And I'm really not trying to like, open any, wounds or whatever. And she goes, writes back, thank you so much. I think they were living in Japan or something now. Like he got deployed. They had a kid. She goes, we had just showed our 2-year-old our wedding video the night before. Like, thank you so much for whatever. And I'm like, man, that's so cool. I would never have known any of that, right? And that to just remake that connection after whatever it had been 5, 6 years, I just thought was so neat. And that wasn't anything, but hopefully, down the line, if people need things or whatever, that they'll remember that we kind of have these connections going on, right?
Totally. And I think to your point a while ago when you're talking about posting on social media, yes, that's a marketing strategy, but that's passive. That's saying like, hey, I'm putting this thing for here, but you have to come find it. This, by reaching out to people, that is actually being proactive. So that's the difference here.
Did you get a lot of good reaction sending out those things like you did?
Yeah, I especially during when my salon was shut down and I really couldn't work in that normal capacity. I had clients who had bought product and left reviews. They asked how to support me, and I gave like giving reviews. You can buy salon product from me. I have an online store, or you could buy a gift card. And then I wrote the thank you cards to all of those clients. But they were all just so supportive and appreciative, and that is what prompted me to do it in the first place. And then I just reached out to everyone because I had the time, and I miss people. Like, we're in this because we love people, so that was part of it too.
Yeah, I just think it's so, especially we work from home, a lot of us don't have employees. I think having those connections, I think, is invaluable. And it really, I think, makes you feel, if you are struggling with work or booking things or it is slow, I think just knowing you're making that difference in whatever vendor field you're in is really helpful. I know that it makes me feel better, that I'm doing something that I definitely think that other people could too.
Totally. Yeah. So should we go into number 2?
Yeah. What do we got?
Yeah, you'll love this one. So number 2, I wrote down to blog, vlog, podcast, find another way to connect with your audience. And I think this is especially important in our industry where we get so caught up in what we do that we don't realize we can actually serve and connect with people in a different way. So for me, in the blogging space, I like writing, so I chose blogging. I think it's important to pick the medium that you enjoy most and that you'll actually do. And it's just a great way to stay in contact with your clients. So then when you are ready to book, or they are thinking of 2021, 2022 weddings, you're front of mind because you've continued this conversation and built this relationship during this time. And so one, pick up a medium that you enjoy doing, and then just list out things that you're passionate about that kind of relate to what you do, but also sprinkle in your expertise and your personality.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think blogging is such an underrated. I did Wedding Network Seattle, and something happened. It never got posted. They reached out to me to write a blog back in like April. They were trying to figure out, hey, we need some content. Let's have some people write blogs. And I wrote a whole thing about blogs, like it was a blog about blogging. And, I don't like to write. I'm not good at it. I have a journalism minor. I'm terrible at writing, but I have my brother who is a phenomenal writer, and I pay him to write. Right. And so
Yeah.
it's a symbiotic thing where, he enjoys doing this, and I pay him, he makes money, and then I don't have to do that, but then I have content to post all the time. And so, yeah, these people that, I don't like writing, I hate writing, that's never an excuse, because even if you don't, you can find somebody, and it's not like $1 million a blog post. This is like normal. You can find people online that will write for you for not a tremendous amount of money. And then you can, if that's not what you want to do, then focus on your passion. But then, yes, I think it's a great way to stay top of mind.
Yeah. And it creates that dialogue back and forth and that know, like, and trust. And just because maybe someone's already worked with you, it gives them something to refer to other people. And if you especially show that you're valuable and you're an expert in whatever industry you are, then you're a resource for people. So for me, I had a free download that was how to wash your hair the right way, because that's an issue I face all the time, both in the salon and with weddings. Bridesmaids, brides just not coming prepared. And for me, it was a way to get people's email addresses so I can continue that conversation beyond this initial moment. So just getting creative and writing about things you're interested in. I'm much more the hairstylist that would write something like that than, here's my specific color formula to use. That's just not my interest. I talk business with every person. That's just who I am. So I'll always kind of tie those two together. There's ways you can blog and still have it relate to your industry, but be unique to you. And I think that's a big misconception too.
For context, so what are we at? Like, it's October.
Yeah.
We just finished blogging about 2019 weddings last week.
Yeah.
And that's not like, we took 6 months off and didn't. That is posting at least once a week, if not two, since, whatever the math. But we just finished last week, and now I have a new project for, Scott to do. But it's 2020 or otherwise, that was our, like, we had our blog schedule set up even before everything went crazy and whatever, and nothing changed with that. And we just kept posting stuff because it's nothing more. It's weird. Yeah. Cause you'll see people, and if they're busy, they're posting, but then, there's vendors I haven't heard from in 6 months. and you're immediately you're not top of mind, right? And that's not a good thing, but I think that it's a really easy way to combat that is by being relevant and posting things and staying top of mind.
Worst case scenario, they see your name and they don't read it. I mean, you have nothing to lose by putting yourself out there. And same with email. You send an email, even if they drag that email into their trash bin, they're seeing your name and they're remembering you. So I think showing up and having a strategy behind that is so important.
So you talked about blogging, you talked about starting the podcast. Like, what other ideas, any of those other ones you want to delve into, but while we're still on this topic, like any other ideas?
Yeah. I mean, it could even be as simple as, hey, I'm going to do an Instagram live once a month or once a week. It's just any content that is a little longer form that you can save and reuse for other things. And that's something you could download and repost somewhere else. That's somewhere you could save it to your phone and put it in an email. So the idea being, again, that if you're posting on Instagram just as a post, that's great, but people have to come find you. The whole goal here is that you are kind of putting out longer form content that shows that you're an expert in what you're doing. And the other thing is not everyone's going to read every single caption that you write. So you can spend all day long on a caption and people might not read it. You could literally copy paste, have that be a blog, and you'll probably have different people read both of them. So not being afraid to repurpose content. And the whole goal here, again, is just to get you in front of more people who will be a great fit for you.
Also, besides even just the getting people eyeballs on it, and the whole point of my blog post was, if nothing else, Google will read your blog posts. So even if you post a million blog posts and brides or grooms or vendors or whoever doesn't read it, Google will read all that stuff. And that is really, at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. I mean, everything else is bonus, right? We want to attract people and get new business, but ultimately your number one viewership will always be Google. And so if nothing else, I think that is a very underrated, like I post, we do, this is an example that I talked about on the blogging post. Scott does a blog post every week. It's called Bizarre Wedding News. And it's just like a catch-all. It's like dumb stuff, some NBA player got married, some whatever. Nobody reads it, right? Who reads it? I don't know. But every week that Google goes, oh, that's more wedding stuff on that website. That's more wedding stuff. That's more wedding stuff. And so then, and then besides, posting it and people seeing my name go across, Facebook or like you said, Instagram, that ultimately too is another key to that.
Yeah. And then down the road, what if you get a client who can, multiple clients ask you certain questions that keep coming up over and over. Instead of you having to manually type out an answer, you can just refer them to your blog.
I love that. Talk more about that. Yeah. Give more examples about that. I love that.
Yeah. So some of the topics I cover, I think of like, what are the questions I get a lot? And then I literally just answer them and that's a blog. And then the concept being, when you're in the DMs, when someone's Facebook messaging you, when you're texting back and forth and you're getting those questions over and over again, instead of you having to spend so much time writing the same answer, you can say, actually, I wrote a blog on this, and then you give them a link and they can go visit on their own. So there's so many different ways that content can be used. And I'm not saying to do all of it. I'm just saying pick one and try it out and consistently try it out.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is about consistency. And I mean, this goes into the whole making the best of your time at home. But yeah, blogging once every 6 months does not mean anything for anything, for viewership, for Google, for anything. You need to blog at least once a week, all the time. It really needs to be a consistent. Yeah, I see this all the time. Hey, we're going to be starting this new thing, and then a week later it goes away. I'm like, hit me up in 6 months when this is still going, and then then we'll see how it is. Why do you think people struggle with that consistency in that way? As someone that coaches people and works through that.
Oh, that's my list stems from like, here's what I'm telling my clients right now. So I think a big part of it is not really having a plan. So I map out like, what's my plan for the whole year? And then I kind of break it down into each quarter. I have kind of a goal I'm going towards. And then my blogs kind of feed into that. That way I can hit multiple birds with one stone. So if I write a blog about one of the things I talk about in coaching is money management, it's just something I'm passionate about. And so I have a whole blog on like my 5 tips to manage your money better. And then I chunk that out. That's 5 Instagram posts I was able to make. And then I repurpose that to a newsletter. So that one thing served me, a total of 7 different ways. And so I think number 1 is people just don't have a strategy behind it. And 2, they don't backlog stuff. So they start like they're building content in the moment. Like, I need a post on Instagram today, I'm going to write this today, or I need a blog tomorrow, I'm going to write it today. And I think the more you can kind of have a plan going into it, and then also have a couple things in the backlog that you've already created, that way when you wake up and you're just in a bad mood or you're not feeling great, like, your business is still solid. And I think that's super important beyond just the blogs and and vlogs and all that stuff. I think social media, all that stuff, you should have like your bare minimum. If I just show up the bare minimum this week, what does that look like? And then anything extra is extra.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think having that stash kind of ready to go. Like I said, if you don't like to write, find somebody. Scott puts stuff in a Google Drive, and then I wake up, I go, I gotta post a blog today. Here we go, right? And it's like I said, if I would have to do that, I would hate that. I would hate to have to like wake up today and go, okay, I got to write 1,000 words about whatever. So find somebody that wants to do that, or maybe
Yeah.
maybe you have a high school, maybe you're a parent and you have a kid that needs money and likes to write or likes to do whatever. I think Irene, one of our photographer friends, she's been on the podcast. I think one of her kids does her Instagram, does her social media and stuff. Well, there you go. Irene probably hates doing that. You have a teenager that's good at that, get the best out of both worlds with that.
Totally.
My question for you, when you're talking about scheduling things, how in the weeds do you get? Because that could be overwhelming or not. Do you look at it in terms of like quarters or weeks or days, or what's the ideal way you think to do that?
Yeah. So I try to do it by quarter because 2020 has taught me a lot about planning too far out. So each quarter I kind of sit down, I write my goals in pen, but I write my to-dos in pencil. And I think that's really important because I think you should have like a strong direction that you want to go and identify what success looks like to you. And then having those steps to get you there, realizing that sometimes things change and evolve, but having that you're generally moving closer to that goal in time. I think that is the key more than anything else. So if you have a Monday where you literally get nothing done, but Tuesday you get double the work done, that's great. Doesn't matter. You're still getting closer to your goals. And as far as like scheduling out the content, again, that's where having like a direction of where I'm guiding people. Some weeks my goal is just to serve. I'm just giving free stuff. I just want to help people. I have no expectations. I'm not selling anything directly. That's the goal for the week. That's my tone for the week. Other weeks I'm launching new products, new programs, new academies. So just always knowing, like, I sit down every Monday to plan out my content and think, okay, what's going on this week? What's kind of coming up next? And then I slowly will guide the conversation that direction. That way it's not like I'm ambushing people with all of these sales that I'm trying to make.
I love that. So to-dos or goals in pen, to-dos in pencil.
Yes.
I love it because I think some people, I'm going to schedule all this stuff, I'm going to do everything, and then you miss one day because you have to work or a client calls in or your kid's sick or you have to go whatever. And then you go, well, that's it. The whole thing's out the window. And it's like you definitely need to, you want structure, but a little flexibility, right?
Totally. Yeah. And that's actually my third point. So that's great segue for you not knowing what I had planned. But number 3 was to automate and streamline. And part of that is social media and your messaging there. And I think just paying attention to when you work best. So for a while, for me, I was planning on Sundays and I was dreading it because Sunday is like definitely is and should be a day off. And so then I was like, oh, what if I just plan on Mondays? And so I started doing that and it's game changing. So every Monday I sit down, I map out my blog, my newsletter, my social media. I have different themes for each platform that I use. And it's a Google spreadsheet that I made basically. So like one thing I will always talk about every single week is my story. One thing I will always talk about every single week is my business and how we can work together. And then I have like a couple different like buckets that I have already labeled. So then I pull from those depending on when it's appropriate. And I think that is super helpful.
In terms of, automating, I think some people get maybe a little intimidated by that or get a little, so I guess if you had to simplify that for someone that's like, hey, I'm not on a business coaching podcast. I'm an expert. Walk me through kind of what does that look like for someone that maybe wants to get their feet wet?
What are the tasks you hate doing that take a ton of your time that are consistently kind of the same thing? Everything's always going to have a little bit of tweaking. And for me, back putting on my wedding vendor hat, that was like my client experience. Oh, just the emails back and forth, that initial email. And then do we do a call? Do we not do a call? So I really just sat down and I was like, what do I want that process to look like? I'm in control. This is my business. And ultimately, I want to be available. I want to be professional. I want to have such a good understanding of my bride that I'll know once we sign that contract that we are a great fit. And if not, I already know enough to say, thank you for reaching out. I don't think we're the right fit. And for me, that was just finding a system that could help support all of that stuff. So step one was to just kind of list out what tasks are super redundant and time sucking. And then step two was to kind of research different options out there. I use HoneyBook for all my scheduling, and like everything is in their invoice. Everything start to finish with entire relationship with a bride is through HoneyBook. And so that's what I personally use, but just finding whatever system works for you that will help that process be a little more streamlined.
Yeah, I think that's some of the thing is experimenting and trying to find, I know like a ton of people like 17 Hats, or you have HoneyBook, and you have the Tovlo, or Tave. Tave is the other one, but I use just like this master web of Google Docs and Sheets and kind of redirects, but it's like whatever works for you. But yeah, that whole, the back and forth and just the paperwork, but I think there's a fine line. I think you want to automate, but then I've also known photographers that are almost like too automated. And then it's almost like a turn off to the client, because then they do feel like they're working with like a robot. So it is that fine line where you want to, like you said, the time sucking stuff that you don't want to deal with, but you still really need to be there for your client, right?
Yeah. And I think the key to that issue is that be really mindful of your words that you use. You can update and customize any of the emails. Even if they're automated, you can go in and customize them, and really be thoughtful of how would you say this in person. And in a gray area, I see this totally failing for people is their bios on their website. So many times you go to read it and it reads like, an essay they wrote in ninth grade when they were writing about someone else. And it should feel like your personality shining through. I think also this idea of writing in third person is kind of old school. I don't know where you're at with that, but I think it's okay to write in first person. You can still sound professional and sound like the professional, but still have more of your personality shine through. And I think that's the key there, is if you're going to automate something, it has to be your voice. I mean, another example for me in the salon, I have automated text. When you book your appointment, you get an appointment confirmation. Don't let the automated one go through and make it sound like you. So like for me, a lot of verbiage I use is like, hey friend, so great to see you. Can't wait to see you this date. Can't wait to catch up on XYZ. It's super customizable. The thing itself is automated, but it's my voice. And I think that's exactly what you're kind of speaking to. I think that's the missing link. If someone gets too automated in what they're doing, they're not letting their voice come through in that process.
Yeah, because ultimately at the end of the day, people are going to hire you for,
Yep.
who you are. And so it is, because I've been to the wedding MBA twice now down in Vegas. It's like, I don't know if you've ever gone, like it's all
Nope.
it's the business of, well, this year they're doing it all digital, because, Vegas is, well, everywhere is pretty shut down, but, they talk a lot on there about, because it's the business of running weddings. It's a business, it's like the wedding MBA, the business of it. And you get all these people, and I see them taking all these notes. Well, I'm going to automate everything. I'm never going to touch the phone again. I'm never going to do. And it's really that balance, because ultimately people are still going to hire you for who you are. And so it's getting that, like when people book with me, like it pre-fills out the contract. I don't know. I still send it back, but you don't want to have it be out of your hands the whole time, ping pong back and forth. You need to have some control in there every once in a while. So
Absolutely. And it's finding that balance. But I just know so many people who also just don't have any processes in how they're engaging with clients, and it shows. So having some kind of framework, I think, is really important.
yeah, what is that like if you get a new client and they have like no idea? Is it like panic mode? How do you approach that?
You mean like a new client for me in the business world, or what?
Yeah, like, and they have no processes at all. Are you like?
It's honestly, I kind of like geek out on it. It's like having a massive junk drawer with just like so much different stuff in it. And I'm like, let's dump it all out. And it's amazing how much clarity comes just from identifying, okay, this all kind of goes together. Okay, we'll tackle this thing and this thing. And that, yeah, I love that process because I'm helping them do it, but I don't have to live in that chaos. That's their chaos. Yeah.
You need,
and I'm a firm believer on like, you have to find the process that works best for you. Everyone's different. I'm very much a Google Calendar person. My entire life is on there, but there's people who still write in planners. It doesn't matter as long as you're doing it.
Yeah. I agree with that. It doesn't matter what avenue you want to do, but you do need to stick with it and be consistent. What do we got for number 4?
That's also a great segue. It's money stuff. It's setting a budget. I think right now is a great time to really look at your business and really identify where your money is going. Especially as a small business owner, it's so easy to get caught up in like, oh, I'm just growing. I'm reinvesting in my business. I'm growing, so I'm going to throw more money in it. I know. We've talked about this before too. And I think that really being mindful of what is that money going to do for you? And also there's something empowering about running a really lean business. And it doesn't mean that you should be eating top ramen every day and like doing all your own QuickBooks to save a penny. That's not the point. It's just being aware of where that money is going and having kind of, once you're aware of where that money is going, then when those bigger expenses come up or you are getting ready to buy something new, you really are able to identify, do I really need to do this now or am I just getting distracted?
Yeah, it's a fine line. I was just joking with Mike. I don't know if he'll even listen to this, but Mike Tobolsky, he's a photographer, and he was messaging me yesterday, and he was like, "Hey, I need a new hard drive for my Apple Time Machine." And he said, "Do you use Apple Time Machine, for your Mac? Like, and what do you use?" And I said, "Oh, whatever." And the photographers are so funny that they'll have like one hard drive that they use for like 10 years. And I'm like, they're like $50. Go get a couple. I mean, there's a line there. You can have a couple. We don't need to be. He goes, well, I'm going to partition it, so I'm going to have some of my stuff on there, and then also the time machine. I'm like, dude, for 50, like you need to be able to spend money on your business. You don't want to just be throwing everything out the window, but you do need to invest. There's a line there again.
Totally. And I think it's that I really speak to that fine line of like business meets personal because I think there's so many resources for both and not very many people like speak to that transition because for us, that line is complicated. It's easy to be like, oh, I need this. I need QuickBooks, but I'm also going to file my personal return, but I am going to use it for my business. And that's our reality is there's so many financial choices that are like that kind of straddle that line. So I'm a huge proponent of coming up with a system with how you manage your money for both. So that way, A, you're making a living because that's part of why we run it. We start our own businesses is we want to have that freedom and flexibility. And B, also your business should be growing as well. And getting real with the numbers, it helps you realize like, wow, I made, I don't know, 60,000, but I reinvested 50 in my business. And it's like, okay, so you paid yourself 10 grand. Was it really worth it for an entire year? Where could we have made some different choices? So I think I really get into the nitty gritty and the numbers and the percentages and all of that in the courses I offer, but money is just, it's such a necessary topic. So, yeah.
Well, and we had talked about that on your Get to Know Your Wedding Pro, how, back in March when kind of all this happened and it really was frightening, just a lot of people, a lot of vendors, they had, book a lot to do a lot of business. And then, everything shut down for like 3 weeks and they're like, I don't, I got to afford my house next month. And, but it's so true. And they, there's always these statistics that say, 60% of Americans, if they owed $400 for something, like they wouldn't have it, and you always hear that and you think that is really scary. And it is, but that also goes to running the business. And it's about, putting some money away and being smart. I mean, what do you, not to give away all the secrets, but I mean, how do you work with people on that, in as much a way as that you want to, give out on this?
Yeah, totally. I share all the things. I have no fear of that. I would say number one, get really intimate with those numbers of how much am I spending in my business to run it? How much money is coming in my business? How much am I setting aside for taxes? I do that every month. I just move a certain amount to a tax bank account it's just a savings account and you literally can change the name. So I just say taxes, 15%. Every month that amount goes over. I think another key thing is pay yourself first. So often we pay ourselves last. What happens when you do that is you're going to spend, and then you're really not going to pay yourself enough to live off of. And that's when we do things like rely on our partner to take care of us, keep that second job we don't need, live on a budget and never get out of that or incur debt. So there's so many negatives by living that way. So I always start with money goes off to taxes, 50% goes to you, you're paying yourself. And then I always pay profit. Every month I set aside money for profit. And at the end of the year, I'm my own business. So I decide where that money goes, whether I want to reinvest in that brand new camera or laptop, or maybe I hire a business coach, or maybe I put that towards retirement. So just having those systems in place, I would say, number one, look at your numbers. Number two, pay yourself half, set aside money for taxes, and then also work towards starting a profit. And if you want to read a book that's about this, Profit First is definitely the place I would go. If you haven't read it already, it really gives you the exact percentages for your business.
And which is this?
Profit First.
Profit First.
Yeah.
It's astounding. We used to watch a lot of Shark Tank, the whole where the people invest their businesses and whatever. And it's always astounding to me sometimes. And you'll go on there and they'll say, well, we grossed $1 million last year or whatever. They have a cheesecake company or whatever it is. But then they didn't pay themselves. And at the end of the year, they only had $10,000 or whatever. And you're like, that is so much work that you did, all year or running, and like I'm a home base. Like I don't have locations I'm running, right? I don't have employees I'm running. And so when you do, and all these costs go up and then you're still only, you just don't have that much left aside. You're like, wow, that's a lot of work for not a lot of money. It's really about tightening that up and being smarter about it.
Yeah. And if you're not paying yourself that 50% each month, you're stealing from yourself to fund your business. What you should really be asking yourself is, how can I need to make more money in my business. How can I grow that? By forcing that kind of tight budget and having that 50% hard line, this is for my salary, this is me as an employee, it forces you to get innovative in your business. And that's when you start to see some real honest areas that need growth and improvement. Even during COVID, I think there's so many choices here we have, especially with online. You could do an online course on anything. So there's options here.
Yeah, I'm as guilty as that before COVID and before March, I spent a lot of money every month on guys to help me with web stuff. And I would still do a lot of the day-to-day, but kind of like, back end kind of building links and stuff and whatever. And it was a ton of money. I mean, it really was. And, in March, not, basically having your calendar dry up and not having that as like a crutch, I figured all that out, right? And that's a ton more money now that I'm able to save and not, hopefully still getting the same benefits, right? And not that, it's not worth paying professionals to do some things, but if you can do things yourself in that way and then keep that money and reinvest it, because that's like a camera or two. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of stuff that you can buy, that you might need versus paying somebody, I know that goes against kind of my previous, pay people to blog if you don't want to, but it's about being smart, right? It's about trying to figure out that balance.
Yeah, exactly. And it just forces innovation and knowing how to do it. Now, when you do outsource that again, you're going to have a better idea of what specifically you want to outsource, or maybe you wait a little longer and then you can actually outsource more of your business. So I'm a huge believer in outsourcing. I think you just also need to be really aware of spending too.
Yeah, I think, it's so tough. Yeah. You want to, it's important not to do the things that you don't know how to do, but then you also don't want to overpay for it. So I definitely understand the tightrope there. What do we got for number 5? And then I'm sure we'll get into some other stuff after this.
Yeah. So number 5 is build relationships. And that is looking at your past clients. How did they find you? And if they were referred by people, reaching out to those people and just thanking them and having a system built in place to thank them in the future. In the wedding space, that's typically other vendors. So what are you doing to connect with them? Exactly what you were saying earlier, how some people have totally dropped off the face of the earth. That's probably going to change whether you're going to refer them down the road. And like, how tacky is it to be like, oh, go work with Kelsey. She's hair and makeup. I haven't heard much from her, but I think she's still in the industry. Like, that's not a huge vote of confidence that you're putting into that referral. So I think referring to other people in the industry is super important. And again, that's the simple just, hey, what's your physical mailing address? I'd love to send you something. Maybe you send them a little thank you. Maybe if you're a DJ, you send them a little mixtape. Like, there's so many little touches we can do to connect with those people, because that is how we're going to survive all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, again, back to your first point about reaching out to clients too. You're not just doing it for the business. You got to do it. The vendors that I work with, we are friends and they know that, right? And not only is that better for us day of, it's better for the client and it's better long term. It's this whole thing. But yeah, I always thank people if I get a referral that comes in from like a photographer or something, but you would be amazed how many people don't, I'm sure they get referrals and then never thank, hey, Bill, thanks for that. Like, I really appreciate it. Cause you would like to know that you're kind of all in that together.
Totally. And I think if you don't have some kind of process like that, build one where it's like, okay, anytime I get a referral, I'm going to write them a handwritten thank you card and send them chocolate, or I'm going to send them a personalized email, like whatever that trigger is. Make sure you have that built out in those reminders, so that way you know to do it and it doesn't fall through the cracks. And referrals come from anyone. I mean, I had Seatown Sweets referred me all the time because we're friends in real life, her and Holly. And but normally I would never see the person who makes the cake. Like, just with my job in the wedding world, those are two very different vendors, but it doesn't have to be exactly who you think it is. It's worth putting all your feelers out there. And I think that goes a long way.
Well, and even just speaking of automating, I mean, I even know that there's companies that do that, right? That do, like, if you book clients, you know, they'll send like and not that, you know, you want to walk that line, but you could, you know, you can automate and it'll send them a thank you card or they'll send them a gift. I mean, there are companies that do that. So if that's something that you really care about, I've always, and you might have thoughts about, I would be curious your thoughts. I've always kind of struggled if I wanted to do that or not. You know what I mean? Like, where you have it like automatically send out like referral gifts or something like a real estate agent would do. Have you ever heard or dabbled in any of
Yeah,
that?
I've heard of that. No, I just think like a personal email or note is way better.
Yeah, but it's you know, it's you definitely want to, you know, show your appreciation somehow, and I think
Yeah,
that's important.
exactly. And just knowing, like I said, just having some place where the thought that you're going to keep all this stuff just like in your mind is just not realistic. So having some kind of, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or you write it in your calendar or you have like a handwritten list of clients to thank for sending referrals, whatever that is, I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's not hard to set up. I mean, you'd be amazed at how easy it is with like Google Sheets and stuff. But you know, having, like I said before, having a list of wedding dates, you know,
Hmm.
with client names and emails, having a list of just all your client emails in the database, or you can break that up. I mean, it's really, you know, and a lot of that stuff, you know, you can pay for HoneyBook or 17 Hats or whatever, but a lot of that stuff you can get for free, you know, with
Oh, totally.
Google and other plugins. And it's just about, you know, finding your comfort level and you know, finding what works for you. But it doesn't need to be, you have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. So I
Yep.
remember I think it was Lori Losi, she's been on the podcast. She's a wedding planner. And after the first wedding MBA, I noticed that she always did like anniversary stuff. And I messaged her and I said, Lori, like, how the heck do you keep all that? You know, how do you keep all that straight? And she said, I just keep a Google sheet. You know, it's not like it's some big crazy secret, right? It's a
Mhm.
lot of these tricks are really simple, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And if you're bad at remembering, make notes for yourself. I working in the salon, I have a really great memory. I'm horrible with names. So, but I will remember random facts of people. And my clients love that I'll be like, well, how was your daughter's graduation? Or how was your son's musical performance? They love stuff like that. And if it doesn't come natural to you, have little notes that after that phone call, that email, those meetings, it'll force you to remind it. Anytime you can add a personal touch, I think that just in our industry especially goes a long way. And I think when it comes to other vendors, instead of having this, I don't think there is a little bit of like a competition mindset for some people, but I think in general, just reaching out to others, being supportive, asking how they're doing, asking how you can support them, and just providing that support, I think is so important.
Yeah, I think that's something that older school wedding vendors were better at. They're remembering like the small details, and I know that you know, Alan and Greg are DJs. They're really good at that. And like Alan could do a wedding from, you know, 10 years ago and still tell you, oh, they had a dog or you know, her grandma, whatever. They're really good at that. And I do think that maybe in our society now, and just kind of the go, we forget some of that stuff, but it is so valuable to remember those details and to have someone call up. I've had like past brides email me like for real estate stuff, or, oh, hey, you did my wedding 3 years ago. I'm like, of course I know I did your wedding 3 years ago. Like, how would I not know that? But people don't expect that nowadays, you know.
Totally. Yeah. So let's change that.
What are when someone, and so now we're kind of freewheeling here, when people, and we talked a little bit about this on your other podcast, uh, big things when someone comes to you, needs help, what are the common things that people are really struggling with now? And it could be a repeats of some of the stuff we've talked about, but what are people really struggling with in 2020, just COVID aside, just with business stuff?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the problem versus solution question. I think so many people are like, oh, I just need to get better on Instagram. I know I need to post more, or I need to really engage more on Pinterest. And usually when we start there, that's actually not the problem. It's walking it back to like, okay, who is your ideal client? What's your brand? What's your story? What's your personality? And really coming up with a strategy of what that looks like. Like for me and my business brand, I love working with all kinds of people. I'm kind of a tomboy. Like I'm a tomboy who likes hair and makeup. It doesn't make sense, but that's just who I am. So I'm never going to use the term boss babe. And it doesn't mean I have any issue with those words, but it just doesn't align with my brand. When you hear me type, talk, text, anything, I'm not going to use those words. So really being clear about your brand and your messaging. And it should be so consistent that when people visit your website, when they talk to you in person, when they talk to you on the phone, it all feels the same. And I think a lot of people don't do the due diligence of establishing that first. And especially now when we have some time, now's a great time to revisit those things. And if you're thinking of kind of rebranding or getting more clear on who your brand is or making some tweaks, I just use Pinterest and make a mood board. And I don't just like start with, oh, brand colors and fonts. It's like, what vibe do I want people to feel? And it's like, I talk about football and drinking beer, and I also like wine, and I also like, fall. And so like just what's a whole vibe you can put together, and that will help you visually see what your brand is. And then you can start to think of what words make sense, what little Kelsey isms, I call them, like what little bits of you are consistently a part of your brand. Then when you go to your Instagram, you're going to have more of a strategy behind it.
Do you think that when it comes to, all the different social medias, all the different things nowadays, there's a lot of people that don't do any of that, or they get overwhelmed and then they're just like, I'm just not going to do any of it. Like, I don't even know what to do. What do you say to people like that, I kind of give up, or that's too much for me?
Yeah, I would say start with what I was just talking about with the brand stuff and who you're trying to reach out to and who you are. And then B, I would just start with one and start super small. Like what can you commit to bare minimum consistently? If that's 1 day a week, great. But show up that 1 day a week and commit to that. And I think once you know who you're talking to and how you're talking, it's so much easier. Then it's not this like, oh, I just need to do it, but I don't really know what I'm doing. It's like, no, I'm talking to a 30-year-old who wants to elope, who loves the mountains and loves nature, and she has a golden retriever, and her partner and her go hiking all the time. Like I can visualize that person. It's so much easier to talk to them when you can picture that. Then when you pull up Instagram to post, you are using those words to talk to that person. So I'd say start simple. This idea that like we got to do all the things and do it everywhere all the time is just way too overwhelming, especially to people who have been in the industry for a while. Maybe a different generation. I think that was the key I would start with. Like, what platform can you start with and show up consistently? And then just that consistency will be a huge lesson over time. You'll see what works and what doesn't. Then you can build off of that.
Yeah, when the whole like Instagram, because I kind of missed the whole Snapchat thing. I just wasn't, and I know it's still kind of whatever, but when it was like the Instagram stories, and I didn't know any of that stuff, right? I mean, I'm not, I worked in news, and we kind of they wanted us to kind of do the Twitter thing, but that, it was like tweeting, there's a car accident or whatever, tweet. But like, I never knew when I got into weddings, I'm like, well, unless I'm posting, a new wedding video, like what am I, right? Like, what am I posting? And it's about figuring it out and figuring out what works for you. And hey, I'm sending the email, I'm sending the video to the bride, snap a photo, tag it. Hey, Natalie, your video's coming, but like, at least in my world, then if there are other couples that I have booked that are viewing that, like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Like, I'll be excited when he's working on my stuff. It's starting small and kind of figuring out, knowing that no one's an expert when they start, right?
No, absolutely not. And I think you have to just kind of come up with a plan. You have to consistently do it. And then you have to just try new things and not be afraid of that. And having some metrics, to me, I don't care how many followers I have. I care how many clients I book. And if I have 100 followers, but I have 10 clients, that's pretty darn good. So not being so obsessed with this idea of having all these followers, I'd rather have really great, consistent people who are part of my tribe, who actually engage with me and want to hang out with me and they believe in me, versus growing that arbitrary number. So I don't pay too much mind to that. I pay attention to who engages with me and what they're saying.
I used to care so much about that, like the Instagram followers. Like I used to be like, oh, I got one more, got whatever. But like you said, it's yeah, you could have 10 people and every single one of them books you, for whatever your service is every single month. And that's way better than having 10,000 people that no one, cares about or whatever. But,
Exactly.
but it is hard, right? It's hard to figure that out.
It is, especially when everyone's telling us that we should care, or at least it feels that way. All the experts, right? Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to circle back when you were talking about, figuring out your mood board and the words and the vibes and stuff. And I do think that some people might like hear that and they're like, well, that's like overkill, or who does that, or who whatever. Even if it's not the same words and everything, the couples that are looking at your site are thinking those things in that different way, right? So like, just because you don't necessarily know like what your website is still putting something out there, whether or not you are intending it to be, right? And so
Mhm.
it's you really do need to cultivate that stuff, because whether or not you are intending it, when someone goes to your site, they are getting a vibe and a perspective of you, and it might be what you want it to be, or it might not what you want it to be. But even if you're not thinking about that, that is still happening. So you want to very much take control of that and make sure that people, right? Am I phrasing that right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I call it's like a filtration system. So if you do that really well and you do it everywhere, website, emails, social media, meaning you know your brand, you know your voice, and you're consistent in that, by the time someone books with you, that first initial discovery call, they're going to be your ideal client, and it's going to be someone you love. They're willing to pay your prices. They already kind of know what you do, and you won't even have to really sell them. So that's why it's important, is it kind of serves as this filtration. So by the time, there's people who will get lost along the way, and that's okay. That's by design. You can't be for everybody. So by the time they land over here, it's like, wow, this person, like I would go get a drink with them right now. Like that's the kind of clients you want to work with. So being intentional about that process, that's the result that you get from doing that.
And I think that just the authenticity of that, I think, is so important, because ultimately you want the people that are going to be attracted to you, that want to work with you. And that's why I keep all this dumb stuff up no matter what I'm podcasting about, because ultimately, you're hiring me, and I don't want to show up. It was the worst thing in the world early on, when I probably wasn't as, out there, just in terms of like having my face and the website and everything. And I booked a client online. I think it was like on email or the phone or whatever. And I used to have a mohawk and everything. And like I have my tattoos, and I had like a tank top on, and I show up to the wedding to like get ready to go. But I had gotten out of the car, I'm pulling up, and I see this girl, and she's putting up like a sign by the side of the road. And I pull up and I'm like, hey, like, where's the wedding? What's going on? Well, it was the bride, right? First off, I'm thinking it's like, sister or friend or whatever. And she's like, well, who are you? And I'm like, I'm your videographer. And like, you could just see like just a little bit, right? A little bit,
Yeah.
because, I just wasn't what she expected, right? And that's more on my fault for not having that authenticity out there of my voice and my personality and my brand, versus like, I don't know who she expected, but it wasn't this like weird mohawked guy showing up all like, hey, what's going on? But so you want to make sure that you're that people know who they're hiring, and that goes across the board through your website and everything else.
Yeah. So it's beneficial, because think of the people you love working with the most. Imagine if that's most of your clientele. And if it's not already, then there's something in your messaging that's off, that's speaking to the wrong people.
That's a great, yeah.
Wait, that's just to the point. I just had to say it.
Yeah, that exactly. Say that one more time. That was a great point.
Yeah, just that whoever, like, if you imagine your very favorite clients to work with, imagine if that was majority of your clientele, most of the people you're interacting with. If you are already doing that, then great. That's the point of having good messaging, consistent messaging. If you are not feeling that way, where you have some clients you love and some that are just kind of harder to work with, there's something in your messaging that is speaking to the wrong person.
I like that.
Yeah.
This has been good. Any other thoughts, feelings, anything before we go?
No, I mean, yes, I guess. I would just say it's a weird season, but there's always going to be stuff that comes up in life. I mean, that's just the nature of it. This one was just a bigger one and a newer one that we all went through simultaneously. But I encourage people to use this time as a gift to really reprioritize how they want to run their businesses, how they want their brand to feel, and make it a true reflection of who they are. I'd love to see like all of our wedding vendors kind of transform their business to just truly be an embodiment of who they are as people. I think that would be so cool to see. Yeah, and I just encourage people to take this time, take advantage of it, and use it for good.
And also, if you are somebody that struggles with consistency or staying on task, to reach out to someone like Kelsey that is a business coach that will kind of hold that accountability, right? Because it is something, and I know we had talked about this on the other podcast that you coach people, but then you also have a coach, to keep you right, kind of tuned into. So I guess talk about that before we go.
Yeah, that would have been a huge failure if I just stopped there. The points I brought up today, these are issues that I help people with all the time. This is kind of my core specialty, is this kind of stuff, the strategy, the behind the scenes, the just overall systems in your business. That's the stuff I love working on. So I have one-on-one clients that is super customized. What are their specific needs? It's a 12-week journey that we go on together. That's been a lot of fun. I have an academy for people who are kind of just getting started in their business and wanting to grow or make some changes, some of these system changes. And then I'll be launching a mastermind in the new year, which will be a super high level group of business owners who are, have some good systems in place, but just want to take it to the next level. And a lot of them are adding online teaching, podcasts, blogs, kind of like an arm to their business that's related that creates another stream of income. So if any of those sound interesting to you, that's kind of my jam. That's what I have to offer. And I'd love to chat more if you would be interested.
Yeah, it's so I think just like the thesis of all this is get yourself out there, right? Be consistent about it. And if that is something that you struggle with, then because a lot of people do, find somebody that can help you, just hold yourself accountable, because it is clients know this, clients know this. If you drop off the earth, if you're inconsistent, whether it's through booking stuff or, and not that social media is the be all end all, but it is still, a telling point, just kind of overall to how you're approaching everything. And so it is important to be consistent and to put yourself out there. And then if you can't find someone that can help you do that. So.
Yeah. And we all benefit from that. Like you said, I have a coach, so I would not be on the path I'm at now without her. So I definitely believe everyone can benefit from that accountability and support. And, being an entrepreneur can be really lonely sometimes. So having someone provide feedback who's been there, done that, they're growing, they're further down the road than you are, someone you can learn from who can also provide support and accountability, I think that will just make you go so much further than anything you do on your own.
Perfect. This has been great. I probably talked more than I normally do on these podcasts, but this is something I'm passionate about. So I do apologize, but I thank you so much for coming on and sharing all this. If people want to find more about you and all the different stuff that you offer, because I just think it's so valuable. I really can't say it. Well, as I break the microphone, I really can't say it enough. So where would you have people check out to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, thank you. My website's kelseymarieknutson.com. Last name is spelled Knutson, because there's lots of ways to spell that one. Instagram, Kelsey Marie Knutson. Facebook, same thing. And yeah, I have a lot of exciting stuff coming up in the works. So come follow along so you can be included on all the stuff that's coming out.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. A little off topic today for the Best Made Weddings podcast, but I still think it's important. Everybody is trying to, work on their businesses, and whether you're working for someone or working for yourself. So I think that this is good. And I wanted to talk about this. So I think that mission complete. We did it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This was super fun.
Awesome. Check back next week. I've never made a good outro for this podcast. So check back next week for another Best Made Weddings. We'll see you later.